All right, guys, time for our weekly partnership segment with The Lever. This week, we are speaking to Matthew Cunningham Cook. Go ahead and bring Matthew up on the screen. He's a researcher and writer focusing on capital markets, healthcare, and retirement policy. Welcome, Matthew.
It's good to see you, Matthew.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. So you wrote a phenomenal piece, let's put this up on the screen, that just tracks factually the distance between Biden's words and what he has actually done as president. So the headline here is Biden offers Amazon workers rhetoric but no action. The president lauded a union drive and declared, Amazon, here we come. But he's refused to even follow his own task force's limited recommendations to boost unionization. This is something that we've been following here as well, Matthew, because Biden famously declared that he wanted to be the most pro-union president in history. How has he done in living up to that bold proclamation?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, the NLRB is doing a great job with very limited resources. His budget hasn't asked for enough resources to go to the NLRB, nor has he challenged Manchin or Sinema on their constant obstruction of any type of funding for agencies that are doing good work. But that's where kind of most of the focus has been. But there's a whole universe of separate things that the president can do via executive action to improve the lives of millions of workers. There we've seen very little developments. I mean, so Tom Gagan, the well-known labor lawyer, has said, the president could actually sign an executive order saying any federal contract has to have a union contract. And so, of course, there's been a total media blackout about that idea. But even on much more modest aims, so requiring these large law firms to disclose the full range of union busting activity that they're engaged in places like Amazon, we haven't seen any types of development on that front, despite the fact that Obama and Tom Perez propagated a very decent rule in 2016. And in April 2021, there was discussion that Biden would bring it back. Once this task force report was released, there was no discussion whatsoever about bringing back this so-called persuader rule. Yeah. And it's particularly relevant because the Amazon workers actually had a lot of success using the existing disclosures for direct union busting to expose the union busters in the warehouse. So this would give Amazon workers, other workers seeking to organize, a lot more tools to expose what's happening inside of their workplace if the persuader rule came back. But we haven't seen any developments on that front.
Got it. So can you go a little bit more into the Amazon piece here specifically? Like, why would it help Amazon? And then also, what are some of the past ties which could explain some of this inaction?
So as the union busting campaign was going on inside of the warehouse, one of the few tools that the workers had was to expose these union busters using the existing forms. And the persuader rule would really enhance those efforts. Now, what we do know is there's extensive relationships between Amazon and the Democratic Party. So Amazon's top communications chief is Jay Carney, who was President Obama's press secretary. Amazon's general counsel, David Zapolsky, donated $300,000 to the Biden Victory Fund. This is the same guy who called Chris Smalls not smart or articulate. Amazon hired, in December 2020, Amazon hired the Ricchetti firm as one of their top lobbyists in Washington. That firm is ran by Jeff Ricchetti, whose brother, Steve Ricchetti, is the senior advisor to the president. There's really no kind of limit, actually, to how tightly hewed Amazon is into the Democratic Party. Jamie Gorelick, who was a top Justice Department official under Bill Clinton, is on the board of Amazon. there's very, very, very tight links at this point, and there's been no pressure whatsoever from Democrats in Congress on the Biden administration or on Democratic leadership to even examine these ties, much less sever them.
Well, and here's one that I didn't realize. So we have talked here already about how this major Democratic consulting group, Global Strategy Group, was hired by Amazon to be part of their union busting campaign. They were so integral that they're actually named by Amazon Labor Union in a complaint against Amazon for illegal union busting behavior. So that's how central they were to this strategy. I knew they were a big player here in Washington. I didn't know that Jen Psaki actually used to work for them, which is something you point out in this piece. So yet another tie there. And then I just find it so disgusting that they would even consider being involved with this campaign. When they were asked, Global Strategy Group, about their union busting efforts at Amazon, they said, oh, we deeply regret being involved in any way, as if they didn't know exactly what they were doing the entire time. So talk about that piece of it, Matthew, because I really do find it outrageous.
I mean, I do think Global Strategy Group is really indicative of some deeper rot here because Global Strategy Group was actually investigated and forced to come to a settlement for engaging in highly unethical activities as it related to pension fund investments and private equity. This was 15 years ago. And Andrew Cuomo, actually, of all people, forced them to sign a code of conduct where they would improve their ethical standards. And again, after this, just like we saw with, companies engaged in the financial crisis like Goldman Sachs, they came back bigger and better, expanded their footprint even larger outside of New York. Now enjoy a roster of Democratic groups, including, top super PACs, the DNC, the DSCC, the DTRIP. And again, Global Strategy Group has apologized, but where is kind of a broader set of questions about kind of, number one, should we be hiring a union busting firm to work for the Democratic Party? And two, are these people very good at their jobs? Elections all the time.
That's the funny one.
We should encourage Amazon and everybody else to hire this group every time. Whoever came up with Putin's price hike and Build Back Better, let's get them on the union busters side. That's actually a great point. I think the overall picture here that you paint is really important because, look, I've tried to highlight the fact that having a National Labor Relations Board with Biden's appointees that has been favorable to workers was really key in Starbucks. It was really key in Amazon because some key decisions went the workers' way. It's really key right now because you have Amazon basically trying to say, oh, it was stolen, the election was rigged, et cetera, et cetera. And so having those personnel in place as opposed to the people who were actively hostile to unions who were in place under Trump, that matters a lot. But Biden says he wants to be the most pro-union president in history. And he doesn't just get to shift the blame to the Senate parliamentarian or the filibuster or Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema, because you're laying out very clearly, first of all, some problematic ties to Amazon. But second of all, most critically here, there are things he could do today with the stroke of a pen that he is choosing not to do. So is that a decent portrayal of the big picture here and takeaway from the story?
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. And I also just think even on the NLRB component, I mean, Biden could be using his bully pulpit every day to say this agency that is doing critically important work is incredibly underfunded as it relates to historical efforts. And it's time to name people who are holding this up, where it's actually, I mean, Joe Manchin co-sponsored the PRO Act. So it's almost certainly it's Sinema more than anybody else who's blocking an increase in funding, combined with the Biden administration's failure to focus on a critical issue affecting millions of Americans. And unfortunately, what this administration has shown time and time again is that, when it comes to actually helping workers, even if there's people doing good work inside of the White House and inside of these key agencies, they're never able to get the time of day with the people who are actually calling the shots.
Yeah.
I think that is all well said. Phenomenal reporting. Thank you for joining us today. Great to meet you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll have more for you later. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.